Hi, I'm Kara Wagland, and this is Stage and Manner. Sure, I am big about paper and writing things down because I find you commit things to memory a lot easier if you write them down. I don't always use the papers, but the second you write them down, they seem to just stick in your brain a little better. I get made fun of a lot at TSN, especially by my 1 a.m. producer, because I have a method. Every night I go in, I do the same thing and I have the same routine. And I like to over prepare to the point where I would say 75% of the notes I don't even use. But I like to have that security blanket there in the event that something goes wrong or something changes, or you have to speak to something that maybe you hadn't been told you had to prepare for. I like to prepare for pretty well any possible scenario. So I write a lot down. I usually get notebooks, like for the start of NFL season. I'll get a notebook and I'll start with like any big storylines for the league and big picture stuff and news of the day, things like that. And then I'll kind of devote a page or two to every team and then just go through and be writing down off-season transactions and who they drafted that year, holes that people have kind of recognized as something that might be a flaw or a strength of theirs, or big contracts that are coming due. And I'll just have notes for every single, their depth charts, things like that, what kind of defenses they play, tendencies they have. So I like to have all of that because if a question's asked, I'd like to have it in my back pocket. Even if I have to look it up quickly in my notes, I like to have it right there. So I do a lot of preparation. And that's just like, I would say the few hours leading up to the show. I would say during the day, I'm constantly listening to podcasts. Like I wake up, I go through emails, I go through Twitter, I read any big stories, kind of do a quick deep dive into any of the stories of the day or things that are kind of developing. And then I watch SportsCenter every morning, regardless of whether I worked the night before or not, because I think if you work the night before, then you should evaluate how you did. And if I didn't work the night before, then I want to catch up on what I didn't see. So I'll watch SportsCenter every morning. And then usually when I'm out for a walk or in the car, I'll listen to some podcasts, just sports podcasts to kind of, sometimes there's little tidbits you can pick up of fun things you can mention in your own broadcast and things like that. Or I'm listening to the radio, sports radio, usually Overdrive if they're on during the day. And then once I go into work, the paper note taking and that sort of stuff kind of starts. It depends on the topic. It depends on the assignment. If it's a new assignment, then I'm preparing more. I would say for the nightly SportsCenter at 1 a.m., there's not a ton of preparation on a daily basis, like just kind of keeping up with daily news and podcasts and what's going on in the world. But if I go in and I was assigned the on cam to write the Robbie Ray winning the Cy Young, that will take me 15 seconds to write. But then if I come in and I have to write the on cam how Man U fired their manager, that might take me 5, 10, 15 minutes more to read some articles and make sure that I have the full context of the story. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I would just say more and more preparation. Like it can definitely make you a little nervous if you're getting assigned to something that you're not overly familiar with. And that's, to me, if the less I know, the more I prepare, the more nervous I am, the more I prepare. And you just read and read and read, listen to podcasts, find people who know more than you and talk to them about it, ask questions, never feel silly about asking a question. If you really want to know, the answer to a question, if you can't look it up, like go and talk to somebody who is really well versed in that sport and they'll break it down for you in a way that you will understand it. But I would just say, I just prepare as much as possible until I feel like I know just as much about that event as I do one of my favorite events.
Yeah.
Most of the time, Sports Center is not too difficult. They don't really throw things at you unless it's breaking news. And then even then, like I did the show when Kawhi announced that he was going to go to LA, and we didn't know when that news was going to break, but we knew we were going to find out where he was going. So you kind of have some notes in your back pocket at all times ready to go. Like if he chooses here or if he chooses here, what it would mean to each team. Like I said, the Roy Halladay show, I was lucky because I've been such a huge fan of his. I was able to pull on some anecdotes that I just knew. Otherwise, that could have been a really difficult show because I didn't have any notes at all in front of me and no time to prepare. And sometimes you have to really rely on your producer. Like the relationship you have to have a lot of trust in your producer, because if all of a sudden they say, breaking news, this is happening, we need you to talk about it or fill, like you have to be able to rely on them to get you correct information and not kind of hang you out to dry. But I would say I go in, say we're doing a dual on cam getting into the Leaf game, say it's Leafs Habs. You might only need one or two little tidbits to get you into the game, but I will go up there with a full page of notes, just in case the game goes crazy and then they decide they want to do a talk back on it or something like that. You have extra notes with you just in case. So any of the big stories, I would say 2 or 3 of the big stories every night, I'll make sure I have a full page of notes ready to go just in case. Going in, it's just more preparation. Rod Smith, I remember telling me when he went over to London to call swimming for the London Olympics, it was the first time he had ever done play-by-play for swimming, and he was so nervous he couldn't sleep. And I asked him what he did, and he said, if you can't sleep, don't fight it. You're going to drive yourself crazy if you lay in bed staring at the clock going, if I get to sleep now, I'll get 4 hours of sleep. If I get to sleep now, I'll get 3 hours of sleep. He's like, just get up and keep preparing. And the more you prepare, the more it'll put your brain at ease. And then, you won't feel so nervous anymore. So I kind of took that to heart, and I followed that. If I'm really nervous about an assignment, I sit down and prepare more. And I can usually tell when I'm ready because I won't feel nervous anymore. During, it's amazing how you don't really feel nerves once you're live on air. You kind of just settle in. As soon as the camera comes, the red light goes on. Afterwards, I'm definitely someone who can get in my head. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And so if something didn't go well, I've gotten better at not letting it sit with me too long, but it can definitely eat away at you a little bit. I like to debrief. You kind of get your go-to people, especially in the industry that you rely on and you trust. And you can call them and kind of debrief, and they'll be honest with you about how bad it was or what you could have done differently. And I record all my broadcasts. So often you'll build it up in your head as that looks really bad. Like I had a mistake on the NFL show yesterday where I confused what we were going to come in at a break, and I had to kind of regroup, and then where I was going to go next wasn't where we were supposed to go. So it was 2 mistakes in a row, and I had to pivot to where we were going. Those kind of things you get more used to just letting roll off your back. But it helps when you can go home and watch it back, because 99.9% of the time, it never looks as bad as it feels. So you might feel like it looked like the craziest thing in the world on air, and you'll watch it and be like, okay, it wasn't that bad. I think that you try not to change your voice, because I came in and the boss that actually hired me when I first started at TSN behind the scenes, I sent demos to him and he told me my voice was too high and I would never get a job on air. And then 3 years later, he hired me on air. So I think that you work at things like inflection, and you work at using your voice to provide emphasis at times, and maybe staying within a range so that your voice doesn't get too high when you get too excited. Like sometimes when you get tired or you get too excited, people can put their voice up into their upper register, and you want to try and keep it in a pretty even place. But other than that, I would say just it's more about putting energy behind your voice than it is about broadcasting. And I think that you can tell when people are on air and they're trying to broadcast because they get that really kind of fake broadcast voice and it doesn't sound natural. I think you should just talk the way you talk, and in moments that need it, put some energy behind your voice, like you're excited about a goal or something like that. I don't. There was nothing about the pandemic that I enjoyed. I know a lot of people enjoyed working from home. I did live shows from my basement for a while. Like literally, I had a studio set up right behind me with about 7 studio lights that took over my basement. Doing live shows from home is not conducive to a good show. So I was very happy to get rid of those. We do shows from a studio for a reason. So I would say I didn't enjoy any aspect of that. I think that that's just for my role. There are people I know that I work with that do other roles that quite enjoy working from home, and it gave them a lot more freedom and ability to juggle childcare and their family and things like that. So for me specifically in a hosting role, I would say 90% no. 10% every now and then it's nice to do an interview from home and not have to go into studio. But for the meat of my job, I doing it from home was not good. I would say you have to go out and make your own opportunities. If you're sitting back and waiting for something to come to you, it's not going to happen. It's a really, really tough industry, especially right now. There are a lot of people who are very good at their jobs who have gotten laid off, and there will be more people getting laid off, I'm sure, because our industry continues to keep shrinking. It's really tough out there. And we're seeing a massive shift in how people are consuming their sports. So going from watching it on cable to streaming it and podcasts and all that sort of thing. So I think it's going to continue to shrink until we kind of get this figured out, how we're going to shift and adapt. So you have to get out there, and I would say just meet as many people as possible, because you can reply to things online, you can apply for jobs online. That doesn't really seem to be how jobs get filled, in my experience. It's all in who you know and who you've met with and who you've networked with, which can be tough if you are starting out, you don't know anyone. So, it's the people who stay behind in class and talk to their professor and pick their brain and let them know what they're interested in that are going to get further, because that professor will then hook you up with this person, and that person will then introduce you to this person. And then work really hard when you do get any opportunity. Make sure that when that opportunity comes your way, you're ready to walk through that door and give your best effort and be really, really good and work really hard. Because there's always going to be, especially in on air, there's always going to be people who are more talented. But I always try to be the person who's working the hardest in the room. It's pretty tough to turn that down for a job, I think. There's 2 sides of that. Because of sports, obviously you have to be accountable in a journalistic sense. And I think that we're losing a lot of that in journalism across the board, whether it be news, weather, sports, media, whatever. You still, number one, have to make sure what you're saying is factual and that you're providing context to what you're saying, because we're being given an opportunity and a platform to help educate people, whether that be on silly fun things or more important pandemic related things, which we're seeing a lot more over the last 2 years. So I would say first and foremost, the host job is to be right and correct and contextualize things. From there, I would say that won't just keep you a job, but being able to relate to people. So people are going to want to watch you if they can feel like you're someone they could also have a beer with or watch sports with. You have to have a relatability factor, I would say. And a lot of that comes with just practice and reps and feeling more comfortable in what you're doing. But those would probably be the 2 things I would say kind of jump out to me.